800-foot oil tanker breaks apart in rough seas. For the daring rescuers, it's like defusing a time bomb that could blow at any moment. Speeding through the air, two expert skydivers have made a deadly mistake. But for one of them, this terrible moment is the beginning of a remarkable story. And a fire at a rocket fuel plant sets off explosions so big they rock the state of Nevada. When millions of pounds of fuel explode, the shockwaves ripple for miles. This Greek oil tanker, the Kirki, is an 800-foot-long floating time bomb. In rough seas 50 miles off Australia's west coast, the entire bow section of the mammoth ship has suddenly broken off and sunk to the ocean floor. Amid intermittent fires, thousands of tons of Arabian light crude oil gush into the Indian Ocean, threatening wildlife and the Australian coastline. When the pumps that feed water to the fire hoses fail, the captain frantically sends out distress signals, then orders his 36-member crew to abandon ship. But when they try to lower the lifeboats into the water, they discover that the lifeboat hoists are also not working. The anxious crew can only stand by helplessly and watch the disaster unfold. Perth TV station dispatches helicopter pilot Tim Bose and cameraman Wayne Curiata.
Yep, I go, slow it down.
They're the first to arrive at the crippled tanker.
And as we flew around, we saw most of the crew on the back end of the ship, waving, thinking that we were a rescue helicopter. And as we came around the front, we noticed the whole front end had gone, and it was just spewing out tons of oil. It was a floating disaster.
It was obviously a very serious situation. There were big seas, strong winds.
Wayne is shooting a close-up of the escaping oil when, without warning...
Oh, get back to the tip. No, just take pictures, okay. Back. It's okay. You got a chopper behind you. Just shoot.
And that's what I actually said to Tim. I said, mate, this thing's going to go up.
As soon as it happened, we realised it was dangerous. But it was no use doing something silly and moving rapidly.
But what if the whole ship just explodes? I mean, it's lost the front end of it. There's gas and oil and flames. That's a deadly cocktail, that lot.
For 5 terrifying hours, the petrified crew worries that the Kirki will explode. Finally, rescue helicopters arrive. One by one, the 37 crew members are plucked from the rolling tanker and airlifted to another ship.
Slowly. Hold up.
The abandoned Kirki now drifts steadily towards the Australian coastline. It trails a menacing oil slick, 36 miles long by 6 miles wide. There are still 60,000 tons of oil on board. Now comes one of the most dangerous jobs on the high seas. Amid surging waves, a specialized team is lowered by helicopter onto the potentially explosive Kirki. They'll try to defuse the disaster before it becomes an ecological nightmare. Trevor Koch and his team from Sydney's United Salvage specialize in mid-ocean operations, but this would be their most perilous challenge.
There's no doubt that there were dangers involved with the job. The vessel was in great danger of breaking up and sinking.
To stop the fires, Koch's men risk being engulfed in flames. They hang over the edge of the sheared-off fore section to disconnect electrical connections that have been igniting the oil. But even as they race to defuse the hot wires, the team faces another problem, one that could create a disaster of epic proportions. Abandoned, leaking oil and potentially explosive, the Kirky drifts to within 8 miles of the Australian coastline.
This afternoon, the oil was closing fast on island reserves off Jurien Bay. Conservation authorities unable to relieve the gloom spreading over local fishermen.
In a dangerous operation, a salvage tug battles heaving seas to pull alongside the volatile tanker. They attach a tow line to begin towing her back out to sea. Their route is marked with a murky trail. Trevor Koch and his salvage crew are appalled when they inspect the ship to discover what went wrong.
Once you had a close look at it, it was all painted up, but it was paint over the top of rust and holes and things that were patched up.
In fact, Koch finds the Kirky totally unseaworthy. Parts of the deck that literally rusted to the thickness of a razor blade were covered with canvas and fresh paint. It's this corrosion that caused the ship's bow to snap off in the rough seas. The Kirky's ragged condition and explosive potential make Koch anxious to transfer the oil to another ship and get off as quickly as possible. The Australian government insists that she must first be towed 1,200 miles north, away from the fishing grounds and population centres. But nature works against them. As storm swells rise, the fore section of the ship begins to sink.
At one stage we had lost buoyancy. The bow was 10 feet underwater, and there was every chance that the vessel could break in half, and we would have had very little chance of getting off had it broken in halves.
The salvage team transfers much of the oil to the rear tanks and is finally able to stabilize the sinking vessel. An empty tanker is brought alongside and tied to the Kirky as the remaining oil is transferred. Only now can the salvage team breathe a sigh of relief.
There's no doubt that this accident could have been prevented. A vessel which has deteriorated should be scrapped, and that was not the case with this particular vessel.
The Kirky is towed to Singapore and sold for scrap. Winds push the oil spill out to sea, where much of it evaporates. Luckily, there were no injuries or loss of life aboard the Kirky. Both the oil company and the shipping company must pay £20 million for the salvage and cleanup. But it's the ship's owners who are most responsible. Their greed and neglect not only risk the lives of the Kirky's crew and those who saved them, but also an environmental catastrophe, spared only by the actions of Trevor Koch and his dedicated team. After the break, a heroic comeback after tragedy in the skies, and the deadly explosions that sent shockwaves for 10 miles through the Nevada desert. In the world of skydiving, it's perhaps the most dangerous mid-air maneuver ever attempted. Called the Diamond Track, it places two free-falling skydivers on a near collision course at a combined speed of over 300 miles an hour. There is no margin for error. The maneuver begins at an altitude of 13,000 feet. Two jumpers leap from the plane, smoke canisters tracing their paths. At 8,500 feet, they turn, placing themselves on a collision course, only to veer away at the last minute, passing by within just 20 feet of each other. For Sergeant First Class Dana Bowman, the danger of the Diamond Track is what skydiving is all about.
The faster the fall, the better off you are, and the more adrenaline you have, and it just heats you up. And you just want to keep going and going and going.
As a member of the United States Army's elite skydiving team, the Golden Knights, Dana regularly performs perilous maneuvers. But nothing comes close to the thrill of the high-speed diamond track.
A lot of guys on the team thought about what would happen if you were skydiving, you were doing a diamond track, and you did a high five. You know, just hand slap. He'd probably break both hands.
There's the plane. Yeah, there's a couple of them just jumped.
On February 6, 1994, the team is rehearsing in the sky above Yuma, Arizona. Dana and his longtime partner, Sergeant Jose Aguillon, begin their jump. They've performed the diamond track over 50 times without a hitch, until now.
Everything was going great. We gained speeds of right around 150 miles an hour, and we continued to streak back towards each other. We were to cross at right around 35 to 4,500 feet, but that wasn't the case.
Of course, those guys, they got a smoke bomb tied to their foot, and whoa, they hit.
Dana and Jose collide in midair at over 300 miles per hour. The impact opens Dana's chute, and he floats to the ground, unconscious. Jose is killed upon impact. Dana is rushed to a nearby hospital, where he lies in a coma for 2 days. Upon awakening, he learns not only of his best friend's death, but that he has lost both of his legs.
When I finally pulled the sheets up and I looked underneath there, and there was nothing there. And I thought about everything that I did in the military, and I just added it all up, and I said, you know, maybe it's going to be hard, maybe it's not. I didn't know.
In just a matter of seconds, Dana Bowman's life has changed forever. In midair, traveling at over 300 miles per hour, he and Jose had miscalculated their paths. By the time Dana realized the error, there was nothing he could do.
For a split second, I did see his eyes, and you know, I seen distress. But what do you do? What do you think? It takes seconds to think about things. We had no time to think.
His complete rehabilitation will take nearly 7 months. Learning to walk is just the first hurdle. Dana must also adapt to a life as a double amputee. Those who know him best, like his commander, Lieutenant Colonel Danny Green, feel if anyone can recover, it will be Dana.
It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that Dana Bowman has the don't quit attitude. I mean, my goodness, the man lost both his legs in a very traumatic accident. But to come back as quickly as he did, takes a very special person to be able to do that.
Dana doesn't consider his comeback complete until he regains the life he had before the accident. He re-enlists in the United States Army and is invited to rejoin the Golden Knights.
Well, I did it. I'm here. I went through a long way with recovery, and I'm just glad to be back here. Especially to be standing here on my feet.
Dana trains with his old unit to prove that he can handle the rigors of returning to the Golden Knights jumping team.
I, Dana Lee Bowman.
Just 188 days after his accident, he is airborne with them again. He re-enlists 13,000 feet in the air and is reinitiated into the Golden Knights with a celebratory jump. His parents watch proudly below.
You have to prove yourself being in my position. Everybody was questioning, can he do this, can he do that? You know, why do I have to keep proving to people?
Well, I often wondered, hey, if something like this happened to me, you know, would I return to skydiving? I tell you the honest truth, and my gut feeling is probably I wouldn't.
Dana regularly skydives now with a team of amputee jumpers known as Pieces of 8. He's also carried the Olympic torch before the Atlanta Summer Games.
I I showed the entire world that it doesn't matter if you lose your legs, you can still continue to drive on. You know, the words of amputee and uselessness, if you think about them, they're not synonymous, especially uselessness.
Dana Bowman is now turning his sights on becoming the first double amputee commercial pilot, learning to fly both helicopters and planes. He's proving to himself that perseverance and heart can overcome any loss. Two massive explosions 4 minutes apart destroy a chemical plant and rock the Nevada desert for miles around. They're captured on tape by a TV technician on nearby Black Mountain. He begins taping when a fire rages out of control at the Pacific Engineering and Production Company, or PEPCON. As fire crews race to the scene, plant workers desperately fight the flames.
The plant employees tried to fight this fire on their own for a while. They figured they could put it out. Well, it kept escalating on them.
Paramedic Larry Sullivan is one of the first to respond.
I'm thinking, oh my God, you know, I knew what was in there.
What is in there is a massive quantity of a highly potent component of rocket fuel, used by NASA to send space shuttles into orbit. So when the first small explosion rocks the plant, fear spreads among the 73 workers inside. Among the employees is process engineer Dave Thayer.
Of course, something like that happens, there'd be a lot of panic and unrest, and so everybody started to leave the building at that time.
All the people in the plants didn't even get in their cars. They just ran through the desert.
It turns out to be the smartest thing they can do. When the chemicals inside the plant explode, 2 employees are killed. Dozens more still fleeing are injured.
It felt like somebody had punched you right in the face. Later I found out that both my eardrums were gone.
Dave Thayer and his supervisor father have made it as far as the parking lot when the blast knocks them off their feet.
He stood up and I stood up, and we realized at that point that we'd been blown about 75 or 100 feet down the parking lot and over the top of probably 10 or 15 cars.
The first big explosion and several smaller blasts spread the fire towards PEPCON's storage yards, filled with thousands of barrels of chemicals.
Fire is escalating. I mean, it's really huge. It's a gray, orange, very scary-looking cloud, and it's huge. I mean, now it's getting to 2,000 feet in the air.
Then comes the second blast that survivors call simply the big one.
I mean, this thing was huge. It was awesome. You could see the shock wave coming across the ground at you. I put my head down, and the shock wave just rocked our truck.
Dave Thayer and his dad are down a small incline on the edge of an evaporation pond when the big one hits.
So we're crouching at the edge of the pond, looking back at the fire. And this time it knocked us about 25 feet out into the pond.
This second explosion demolishes what's left of PEPCON and everything else within a quarter-of-a-mile radius. It rocks nearby Las Vegas with the force of a 3.5 earthquake. It also blows apart an underground natural gas pipeline, triggering towering flames that can be seen for miles. The blasts do more than 40 million pounds worth of damage, destroying a neighboring plant and affecting more than 3,000 homes and businesses. After the blasts, investigators dig through the rubble, and they discover there was a huge surplus of ammonium perchlorate, an ingredient for rocket fuel.
Liftoff
liftoff of the 25th Space Shuttle mission.
2 years earlier, NASA had put the Space Shuttle program on hold after a national tragedy.
Challenger, go at throttle up. Challenger, go at throttle up. Flight Fido, go ahead. RSO reports vehicle exploded.
In the aftermath of the Challenger disaster, NASA never cuts off their order for fuel. So Pepcon continues to manufacture ammonium perchlorate. They just keep piling it up in plastic containers. Robert Caligari is a specialist for Failure Analysis Associates, the company Pepcon hired to investigate what happened.
On the day of the explosion, May 4th, 1988, there were on the order of 9 million pounds of ammonium perchlorate on the facility. Normally, they would have no more than 2 or 3 million pounds.
But what caused that fuel to detonate? Pepcon blames a gas leak in that underground pipeline. By itself, ammonium perchlorate is relatively stable.
But if you mix ammonium perchlorate with an organic material, a carbon-based material, like natural gas, you make an explosive.
Local fire investigators blame the tragedy on a spark from a cutting torch. According to Chief Fire Investigator Mike Patterson, the fire creates the right conditions to set the ammonium perchlorate off.
You were mixing other things with it, aluminum from the melting aluminum bins that they were in, and all kinds of impurities.
Including melting plastic from the storage containers. In the end, Pepcon is fined for safety violations, and they move to the neighboring state of Utah. But the memories remain.
Well, it looked like a war zone. I mean, everything at that whole plant was either twisted, burned, destroyed, or flattened.
The smoke and the debris just rolled up almost like an atomic bomb. In fact, a lot of people thought it was an atomic bomb explosion. They're still scared to this day.
Ignited by fire and fed by 9 million pounds of ammonium perchlorate, the massive Pepcon disaster resonates to this day in the stillness of the Nevada desert.
And What Went Wrong returns next Tuesday at its new earlier time of 8 o'clock.